Imagine pulling up to a drag strip on a Saturday afternoon, and in the left lane, you have this dedicated, low-slung, incredibly noisy Italian sports car.
Right, the classic exotic.
Exactly. But then, in the right lane, there's a family station wagon,
Hmm.
like complete with a rear cargo area big enough for a golden retriever, maybe a baby seat strapped into the back.
Which is just a hilarious mental image at a drag strip.
It really is. But then the light turns green, and the station wagon it absolutely vaporizes the sports car off the line. It doesn't just win, it completely gaps a purpose-built exotic. And today, we are looking at the vehicle that just made that scenario a reality.
Yeah, it forces us to completely reevaluate, the classic automotive trade-off. Because for the last century or so, utility and performance, they basically sat at opposite ends of a spectrum.
You had to choose one or the other.
Right. You bought a station wagon for cargo space and reasonable insurance, and in exchange, you just accepted that it handled like a heavily loaded barge.
But the rule book has basically been thrown out the window here. Welcome to the deep dive. Buckle up, because today we are exploring a practical family station wagon, a shooting brake, to use the proper terminology, that recently joined the sub-3-second 0 to 100 club.
It's still hard to wrap my head around that number for a wagon.
Oh, totally. We are going to look at a vehicle that breaks the charging speed barrier, operates as a literal rolling supercomputer, and proves why your next grocery getter might honestly be the fastest thing on your block.
The engineering leaps we're discussing today, they aren't just incremental updates. We are looking at a fundamental shift in vehicle architecture.
Yeah, and we've pulled today's insights from an incredibly detailed DRX automobile YouTube review, alongside some really eye-opening recent industry reports from Gasgoo and Car News China. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the 2026 Zeekr 07 GT.
The GT.
Because most automakers look at a station wagon and they think about, I don't know, flat pack furniture or soccer practice. Zeekr apparently looked at a wagon and thought, let's build a 780 horsepower weapon.
Which is just an aggressive starting point.
Insanely aggressive. They took the 2025 model and gave the 2026 all-wheel drive flagship a total output of 585 kilowatts.
And to visualize what 585 kilowatts actually means for the physical chassis, we have to look at the motor split, because they've placed a 215 kilowatt motor on the front axle, and then a massive 370 kilowatt motor on the rear.
Wow.
Yeah, so when those two synchronize, you get a combined 784 horsepower. Pushing that much force through 4 tires fundamentally changes how a vehicle of this size, interacts with physics.
Which gives us that brutal 0 to 100 kilometer per hour sprint of 2.84 seconds.
2.84, yeah.
I mean, the 2025 model did it in 2.95. And now, shaving a tenth of a second might not sound like much to the average driver, but when you're already under 3 seconds, the amount of energy required to shave off even a fraction of a second is exponential.
Oh, absolutely. The air resistance alone at that acceleration curve is like hitting a solid wall of water.
Exactly. And to handle that, they've made massive Brembo brake discs standard. Because obviously moving 2 tons of metal that quickly requires an unbelievable amount of stopping power.
Right. The braking infrastructure is critical here. When you have a vehicle capable of supercar acceleration, the kinetic energy you have to dissipate to start it is immense. I mean, standard brakes would literally glaze over and fail after a single hard stop from those speeds.
It's terrifying to even think about.
It really is. So the Brembos aren't like a luxury addition here. They are a vital safety necessity.
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting, though. Giving a family station wagon 784 horsepower feels a bit like strapping a Saturn V rocket to a living room sofa.
That's a great way to put it.
It is hilarious, and I love that it exists, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Why does a station wagon need nearly 800 horsepower? Isn't this massive power output completely overkill for a quote-unquote practical family car?
On paper, yeah, it sounds like absolute overkill. But the philosophy behind this goes back to the concept of the Grand Tour reimagined for the electric age.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So historically, a Grand Tourer was a vehicle designed to cross continents at high speed without fatiguing the driver.
Right. But in the internal combustion era, getting that kind of effortless power meant a massive, fuel-thirsty V12 engine.
Which basically dictated a long hood, a cramped 2-seater cabin, and, well, a 6-figure price tag.
Exactly. You had to sacrifice the utility to get that grand touring performance. But electric architecture completely changes the packaging. By offering 784 horsepower in a shooting brake format, Zeekr is basically democratizing that extreme performance.
So it's not about drag racing at every stoplight.
No, not at all. The goal isn't actually for the driver to do 300 kilometers an hour on the way to the supermarket. The power is there to provide an infinite reserve capability.
Ah, I see. Whether the car is fully loaded with passengers and luggage or, climbing a steep mountain pass, the powertrain never feels strained. It just delivers this effortless, dynamic driving experience.
It's the luxury of never having to ask the car to try hard. It just does it.
Yeah.
But pumping that much juice to those motors instantly creates a massive thermal and electrical bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
You can't just drop bigger motors into a chassis without fundamentally changing the plumbing that feeds them.
Right, which brings us to the most significant structural upgrade of the 2026 model, which is the transition from an 800-volt system to a full 900-volt high-voltage architecture.
And the 2025 model was running on 800 volts, which the industry still considers top tier. So bumping to 900 volts, how does that actually change the physical reality of the car for you, the driver?
It comes down to basic electrical physics, specifically Ohm's law. Power equals voltage multiplied by current. So if you want to deliver massive power, whether that's to the motors for a 2.8-second launch or from a charging station into the battery, you can either increase the current or you can increase the voltage. But increasing the current creates a massive problem, which is heat.
Because pushing more current through a wire creates more friction, essentially.
Precisely. Heat is the ultimate enemy of EV efficiency and battery life. By pushing the architecture to 900 volts, Zeekr can deliver the same or even greater power while significantly lowering the current.
And less current means less heat.
Exactly. Less current means the wiring can be thinner and lighter, and most importantly, the entire system runs vastly cooler. This thermal management is the real secret sauce here.
Which pairs perfectly with the 100 kilowatt-hour Quillen battery they're using. The sources note this setup provides up to 825 kilometers of CLTC range.
That's a huge number.
It is. Now, to be clear for you listening, CLTC stands for the China Light Duty Vehicle Test Cycle. It is notoriously a bit more optimistic than the EPA readings we might be used to in North America. But even if you shave like 15 or 20% off that number for real-world highway driving, you are still looking at an absurdly long-legged vehicle.
Yeah, the total range is impressive, but the thermal efficiency of that 900-volt system unlocks the real party piece, which is a 5.5C ultra-fast charging speed.
Okay, let's define that, because 5.5C sounds like a temperature, but it's actually a multiplier, right?
That's a great point of clarification. Yeah, in battery terminology, C rate measures the speed at which a battery is fully charged or discharged. So a rate of 1C means the battery charges from empty to full in exactly 1 hour.
Okay, so a 2C rate would take 30 minutes.
Right. So a 5.5C charge rate means the system can theoretically accept energy at 5.5 times its total capacity in a single hour. It is just a staggering flow of electrons.
And the practical result of that 5.5C rating is that this car can juice up from 10% to 80% in just 10.5 minutes.
10.5 minutes. Just let that sink in.
In the time it takes you to stretch your legs, use the restroom, and grab a coffee, you have added enough range to drive across multiple state lines. It also features a 60 kilowatt V2L, or vehicle to load discharge. And I really want to pause on that number for a second. 60 kilowatts.
Yeah, that's not normal.
Not at all. Most EVs with V2L give you maybe 3 or 4 kilowatts, enough to run a blender at a tailgate or charge a laptop. 60 kilowatts can power an entire residential block, or literally function as a mobile level 3 fast charger for another stranded EV.
It's basically a mobile power plant at that point.
It really is, but I want to push back on the charging speed for a second. A 10.5-minute charge time sounds incredible for a YouTube spec sheet, sure.
Yeah.
But is that actually going to shift everyday consumer behavior and kill range anxiety for the average driver?
I think it absolutely represents a behavioral shift because it fundamentally attacks the psychological barrier of EV adoption.
How so?
Well, the friction point of long road trips in an EV hasn't really been the range itself, right? It has been the downtime. If your road trip requires you to sit in a Walmart parking lot for 45 minutes every time you need power, the logistics of your travel change entirely.
Right, you end up planning your life around the car's needs, rather than the car serving your needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by compressing that charge time down to 10.5 minutes, the 900-volt system aligns the EV experience with the natural biological cadence of human travel.
The biological cadence, I like that.
Yeah, you naturally want to stop for 10 minutes every 3 or 4 hours anyway to stretch or get a drink. It removes the waiting penalty. The car finishes charging before you even finish your coffee.
Making the car wait for you, rather than you waiting for the car. I love that.
Uh-huh.
But managing all of that, the 5.5C charging, the thermal dynamics of the 900-volt system, the torque vectoring for the 784 horsepower motors, that creates an immense data bottleneck.
A massive one.
Which means throwing bigger motors at the car wasn't enough. They had to completely rip out the car's brain.
Right, a physical powerhouse requires a digital powerhouse to actually keep it on the road. So the 2026 model introduces the next generation Nvidia Drive Thor-U chip.
And let's look at the jump in computing power here, because it is staggering. The 2025 model, which again launched less than a year ago, used dual Nvidia or NX chips. Those pushed out 508 TOPS. Now, TPS stands for tera operations per second, literally trillions of operations.
Right.
The new single Thor-U chip, 700 TOPS.
Yeah, and to visualize that leap, think of TOPS like the number of lanes on a massive data highway. The previous setup gave the car's computers a 500-lane highway to process information. This new Thor-U chip provides a 700-lane highway.
But why on earth does a car need 700 lanes of data processing?
Because of the How-Han Intelligent Driving 2.0 system. We are talking about an end-to-end large AI model tasked with navigating incredibly complex dynamic environments autonomously.
Like city driving.
Yeah, imagine the car entering a multi-level, poorly lit parking garage, or a really messy roundabout. It has to process high-definition data from LiDAR sensors, millimeter-wave radar, and high-resolution cameras simultaneously.
That's a lot of inputs.
It is. It has to identify pedestrians, calculate the trajectory of other vehicles, map the physical concrete pillars, and modulate the steering and the 784 horsepower motors all in real time, without a single millisecond of lag.
Wow. Because if that data highway gets congested, the car hesitates.
Yeah.
And at these speeds, hesitation is dangerous. So the Thor-U chip ensures the sensors never sit in traffic waiting to tell the brakes to engage.
Exactly. And that computing power extends into the cabin as well.
Oh man, the interior, it reads like a sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
You have a 15-inch 2.5K OLED screen they call the Sunflower.
I love that name.
Me too, because it physically motors and tilts towards the driver or the passenger depending on who's actually interacting with it. And then there's the massive 35.5-inch augmented reality head-up display.
The AR HUD.
Yeah, it beams your telemetry, speed, and turn-by-turn navigation directly onto the windshield. And the sources say that displays are bright enough to remain crystal clear even if you were driving directly into glaring sunlight. Wrapped around all of this is 1.4 meters of Napa leather and an immersive 21-speaker Zeekr Sound Pro system.
It basically creates an environment that isolates the passengers from the brutality of the vehicle's performance capabilities.
But inside this first-class lounge, there's a really fascinating contradiction. With 700 TOPS of computing power, an AR HUD, tilting OLED touchscreens, and a car that can basically drive itself, Zeekr deliberately gave the GT a row of physical, tactile buttons on the center console.
Yep, real buttons.
And the standard 007 sedan doesn't even have these. It's like buying a state-of-the-art quantum computer, but insisting the manufacturer includes a mechanical, clicky typewriter keyboard. Amidst all this space-age tech, why are we seeing a deliberate return to analog, tactile controls?
What's fascinating here is how extreme digital capabilities are finally forcing a return to ergonomic, human-centric design.
Interesting.
For the last decade, the overarching trend in the EV industry has been minimalist aesthetics, right? Automakers buried every single function from the windshield wipers to the glove box release behind a touchscreen menu just to make the cabin look as clean as possible.
Which looks great in a showroom, but is frankly terrible when you are actually driving.
Exactly, because touchscreens inherently demand visual attention. You have to take your eyes off the road, look at the screen, and visually confirm your finger is hitting the right digital slider.
Yeah.
When you are piloting a vehicle capable of going from 0 to 100 in 2.8 seconds, asking the driver to look down at an iPad to adjust the climate control is fundamentally unsafe.
Because muscle memory is just faster.
Exactly. A physical button provides immediate tactile feedback. You can reach down, feel the ridges of the switch, activate the defroster, and verify it clicked, all without breaking your visual focus on the road.
That makes total sense.
Zeekr recognized that while their internal software is bleeding edge, human physiology hasn't evolved. It is a highly mature design choice that prioritizes the safety of the driving experience over a trendy, minimalist aesthetic.
Form-following function, especially when that function is moving at lightning speed. But looking at all this cutting-edge techs, the 900-volt architecture, the Thor-U chip, the insane charging speeds being packed into this car so rapidly, brings us to a highly unusual market dynamic.
Yeah, the timeline of this rollout might actually be the most disruptive part of the entire story.
Let's trace the dates here because it's wild. The 2025 Zeekr 007 GT launched on April 15, 2025. It debuted in three trims: RWD, long-range RWD, and 4WD, aggressively priced between roughly 220,900 and 232,900 yuan. We are talking about a car that, as of right now, has been on the market for mere months.
Mere months.
Yet the sources report the current model is already completely sold out in China ahead of the Q2 2026 refresh launch. They literally cannot assemble them fast enough, and they are already sunsetting the platform for the next version.
And if you look at the regulatory filings for the upcoming 2026 refresh, the exterior design is virtually untouched.
Really?
Yeah, it maintains the exact same footprint as a mid-size wagon. 458 millimeters in length, a 200 and 925 millimeter wheelbase, the panoramic glass roof, the integrated front light curtain, the frameless doors and mirrors, none of that is changing.
The entire R&D budget went into the unseen nervous system.
They are selling a fundamentally upgraded brain and cardiovascular system inside the exact same body. Zeekr even announced price adjustments to account for the rising costs of these advanced EV components. They aren't trying to entice buyers with a new paint color or a facelift. The consumer demand is purely for the internal technology.
So what does this all mean for the consumer? I mean, a car launches in April 2025, sells out instantly, and is heavily refreshed with an entirely new electrical architecture and supercomputer chip by early 2026. Are we witnessing the EV market adopt the exact same relentless, demanding iteration speed as the smartphone market?
We absolutely are. What we are seeing, particularly driven by the Chinese auto industry, is the transition of the automobile from a mechanical asset to a piece of consumer electronics.
Wow.
Traditionally, an automotive platform would last 5 to 7 years. You might get a minor cosmetic facelift in year 4.
Right, you bought a car expecting the hardware to be relevant for a decade.
But today, battery chemistry, thermal management, and silicon chips are advancing exponentially. If an automaker waits 3 or 4 years to update their hardware, their flagship vehicle becomes technologically obsolete compared to the competition. We are entering an era where you aren't just buying a car, you are buying a rolling iPhone.
And the hardware inside that rolling iPhone becomes outdated in 18 months.
Exactly. Automakers are being forced into yearly iteration cycles, completely retooling their assembly lines for new internal architectures just to stay relevant. The market demand for the absolute bleeding edge of autonomous driving capability and charging speed is so insatiable that consumers will buy out an entire inventory run just to make way for the Thor-U chip variant.
It's crazy.
Standing still for a single quarter means falling behind.
It's a hyper-competitive arms race, and the station wagon is suddenly on the front lines. So, to distill all of these sources down for you listening, the 2026 Zeekr 007 GT is absolute proof that the future of the automotive industry is way past just shifting to zero emissions.
Yeah.
That's just the baseline now.
Yeah, that's table stakes.
Exactly. The new battleground is blending unimaginable physical performance, 784 horsepower, sub-3-second sprints with unprecedented digital intelligence and charging times that actually respect a human schedule. They took the ultimate compromise vehicle, the family grocery getter, and engineered it into a zero-compromise powerhouse.
Which leaves us with a fascinating philosophical dilemma about the broader automotive landscape.
Oh, let's hear it.
Well, if an everyday family shooting break a car, you can easily load up with camping gear, and a dog can now feature autonomous driving, pack 700 TOPS of processing power, and casually gap traditional supercars off the starting line for a fraction of the price. What will define an actual exotic sports car in the future?
That is a brilliant thought to chew on.
Right. If raw speed and horsepower are now available in a practical wagon, will exotic manufacturers have to find an entirely new metric to justify their existence? Will raw speed even be the benchmark anymore?
Yeah, when a station wagon with a baby seat in the back can run a sub-3-second sprint, what does the actual supercar of the future even look like? That is wild. Well, we want to explicitly and warmly thank you for joining this deep dive today. We know your time is valuable, and we genuinely appreciate you spending it with us to learn, explore, and get well informed on the insane speed of this industry. Keep questioning the road ahead, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.